This is an analysis of the characters in Chapter 1 of John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. There are in fact only two main characters in this opening chapter, George and Lennie, and they are the central dynamic duo of the whole novel. They come on the second page of the novel, one walking in front of the other, George leading, Lennie following. That sets you up for their relationship throughout the whole novel. And there's something else that's really immediately apparent about them, which is, perhaps surprisingly, if you've read the whole novel, the slapstick kind of comedy aspect of their relationship. They walk into the clearing, one man in front of the other. The first man stopped short in the clearing and the follower nearly ran him over. That is pure slapstick. It makes you laugh. It makes me laugh visualising it. Why was Steinbeck doing that? Well, he wrote this book in 1937, and at that time, Americans reading this novel would definitely have known of the famous Hollywood comedy duo Laurel and Hardy. They broke out with their success in the film The Music Box, which is from 1932, 5 years before Of Mice and Men was written. They're very much about slapstick humour, and it's a clear reference to them when Steinbeck has them walk on in this physically humorous way at the start of his novel. So why has he done that? Well, I think it's very interesting that what he wants the reader to think about immediately is this comedy duo from Hollywood. And Steinbeck's basically saying, what happens if you take this kind of physical humour and comedy away from Hollywood, away from the flashing lights and the roaring 20s and the brilliant, amazing period of America's boom time, and you put those two comic characters into the wilds of California during the Depression of the 1930s. How are they going to survive then? And that's what Steinbeck's done. They kind of represent the good times gone bad. The characters of the good times, the fun times, placed into the Depression era. Let's see how they get along, says Steinbeck. So let's start with George. Now, George is presented as an intelligent man, first of all. The description of him: small and quick, dark of face, restless eyes, sharp, strong features. Quick is a notable word. Sharp, strong, the sibilance there creates this feeling of constant alertness. Every part of him was defined: small, strong hands, slender arms, thin, bony nose. He's precise, he's incisive, and he's also a very cautious man. So Lennie starts drinking from the water immediately, and George kneels beside the pool and drinks with quick scoops. Tastes all right. Don't really seem to be running though. He's kind of analysing the situation with the water, isn't he? He's much more thoughtful than Lennie. Of the Laurel and Hardy duo that have been transplanted from comedy world to here, George is the one who's the cleverer one, and he's the one who's thinking about things and analysing and working out. He's also in charge in the relationship. You know, he's the kind of parental figure. He looks after the bus passes, the work permits. He takes care of everything. So he's the thinker of the two. But he's not particularly happy to be in this situation, and he bursts out with angry rants. Really, what he's ranting against is being put in this situation. You know, it was the Depression. The good times had ended. You've got these migrant workers, they're travelling across America and they're trying to just, you know, make ends meet, and with this ultimate dream, which is a fantasy of being able to own some land. And George is just really angry about that. And he really just wants to break out by himself and just, you know, get along so easy without Lennie. And he shouts at Lennie about this and he rants at him. But then he reins it in. When he sees that he's made Lennie unhappy, he has these moments of compassion. He puts his arm around Lennie. He says, I've been mean to you. Comes closer to him. Shows that actually it's more important to have a friend in such dire situations. So yeah, he's analytical. He understands the situation. He's really angry about it. But ultimately, he realises that you've got to be compassionate, you've got to be together, you've got to be with someone else, you've got to have a friend, and that's more important. He really sort of shows the reader the difficulty of being a clever man in a situation which is totally out of your control, a situation where you don't have any money, you've got to get some money together. Steinbeck shows through him that ultimately the values you need are not the values of individualism, but the value of friendship and caregiving. Then we've got Lennie. Now, we've talked about Lennie in the themes video for chapter 1, which you can see here, as being the embodiment, really, of the physically strongest male in the community, the dominant survivor. But we didn't talk in that video about how Lennie is actually mentally, he's a tiny figure, isn't he? I mean, he's got the smallest brain of all of them. So it's an incredible kind of juxtaposition between his physical dominance and his mental subordination that Steinbeck gives us in this character. And again, what Steinbeck's doing is showing, a man who is completely out of his depth in this world that he's living in. There's no care, there's no state support for people with cognitive challenges, the like of which Lennie faces. How would he survive without George? He's got this kind of childlike wonder about the world. One of the first things he does is he wiggles his fingers so the water arises in splashes, rings widen across the pool. Look, George, look what I've done. I mean, what mental age do you need to have to be kind of fascinated by making little ripples in a pond? 2 or 3, isn't it? I think small children at that age, I can remember my children at that age, that's the age when they would have got excited about making ripples in a pond. He's such a child. And he's also childlike in the way he attempts to manipulate George. The incident with the ketchup. George is getting really angry about the situation they're in. If only I didn't have to live with you. Ketchup, what ketchup? And really, this is a passionate outburst from George about the terrible circumstances they're in. And when it finishes, then he's like, I didn't mean it about the ketchup. He completely fails to understand both George and the situation they're in. All he can get is the anger of the parent figure that's right in front of him, right there. So, he's completely childish. So that's a kind of dangerous combination, isn't it? This physically dominant male with this child's mind. It's brilliant what Steinbeck has done there. And let's finish off by talking a little bit about their relationship. One of the first things you start asking yourself as a reader is, why on earth are these two men together? They seem to have nothing in common at all. So we're asking ourselves right from the start, what are they travelling together for? And a variety of reasons are given to us during the first chapter about why they might be together. One of them is that George could actually be using Lennie to get a job. So George is talking about how they're going to go and meet the boss, and when they do, you just stand there and don't say nothing, George says to Lennie. If he finds out what a crazy bastard you are, we won't get no job, but if he sees your work before he hears your talk, we're set. You got that? So George could be using Lennie as the brawn while he's the brains in order to get work. But as the chapter goes on, we find out that there could be another reason for them being together. It turns out that George actually knows Aunt Clara, Lennie's relative, and later on he says, you stay with me. Your Aunt Clara wouldn't like you running up by yourself, even if she is dead. So there seems to be some kind of family responsibility that George has got for Lennie, for them being together, a kind of a family bond that he doesn't want to break. And as the chapter concludes, we actually realise that probably the most likely reason for them being together is this idea of them needing a companion. When they start talking about guys like us are the loneliest guys in the world, this is George building up to talking about their dream of owning land. They got no family, they don't belong no place, they come to a ranch, they work up a stake, they go into town, they blow their stake. He's describing here the typical migrant worker, George is, isn't he? An individual who comes into town, who gets some money, blows his money, and then moves on. But that's not like us. Lennie broke in, not us, and why? Because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you. That chiasmus there shows their interdependence, They need each other. They're looking after each other. And that's really the reason that they're together, isn't it? It could be that George is using Lennie, but it's much, much stronger, the argument that they need each other, and particularly Lennie needs George. George is kind of a bit more ambivalent about it. But Steinbeck really shows us the power of companionship, and he sets it up here in this first chapter so that we can reflect on that idea as the whole novel develops. What is going to be better? Being an individual, looking out for yourself, or being with someone else? So yeah, there are various ways in which their relationship works. There's a kind of parent-child relationship, there's a leader-follower relationship, there's a kind of mentor relationship, there's a caregiver relationship, but ultimately there's a relationship of companions. Lennie gets a lot from George, and George, what he gets from Lennie is this ability to sort of calm down and to be a bit more peaceful. And so it works both ways. As we're coming towards the exam season now, I'm hoping to put out 1 or 2 videos per week to get the whole of Mice and Men up for you before the exams begin. So if you want to find out when I'm going to publish my next video, or when I have published my next video, click on the alert button, the little bell, and you will get a notification to tell you that I've published my next video.